About History series, about 18th to 19th century Taiwan trade.
Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today we're zooming in on a really wild turning point in history, how intense imperial pressures forced 19th century Taiwan onto the global economic stage. We're going to explore how an island known for its incredible resources and perfect geographic conditions suddenly found its doors literally pried open by Western powers, and how that completely transformed its entire economy. We'll look at the incredible wealth generated by its unique exports, but we'll also confront the tragic costs of this sudden forced globalization. Okay, let's dive right into this. We'll start with Western eyes on Taiwan, then the opium import crisis, the sweet success of Southern sugar, camphora's global monopoly, and finally, the Formosa tea boom.
Section 1. Western eyes on Taiwan, the catalyst.
So to really grasp how Taiwan got yanked into the global supply chain, you gotta look at its geography. It was absolutely crucial. Western ships were constantly wrecking in the surrounding waters, and they desperately needed a base for rescue and resupply. It basically kicks off in 1840 with the Opium War. The Qing Empire gets defeated by Britain, ceding Hong Kong, but honestly, the British were already smuggling opium into Taiwan way before that. Fast forward a decade, 1850, and the UK formally demands access to mine coal in Keelung, plus trade rights. The Qing court just flat out refuses. Then, in 1854, the famous US Commodore Perry, yeah, the same guy who opened up Japan, sends a fleet to scout Taiwan's ports and coal fields. He actually comes back recommending the US just occupy the island. But the real breaking point, that hits in 1858. The Qing Empire loses again to Anglo-French forces, and the treaties of Tianjin are signed, forcibly opening Taiwan's doors to the world. And get this, it wasn't just Commodore Perry floating the idea of military occupation. Other American officials actually pushed to buy the island of Taiwan outright. No way, right? They saw it as the absolute ultimate foothold in the Pacific. Imperial powers were just desperate to lock down Taiwan's strategic value, even though ultimately that American purchase never actually happened. So what did those 1858 treaties actually do? Well, they officially opened up 4 specific ports. Up north, you had Tamsui, and down south, Anping. Those were designated as the primary ports. Then Keelung and Sito acted as their respective secondary ports. And man, the change was practically overnight. Foreign merchant ships just flooded in. Western nations set up consulates. These huge trading houses known as Yanghang popped up. And suddenly merchants and missionaries are pouring in. The doors were wide open. All right, Section 2, the opium import crisis. Now, what's really interesting and, frankly, pretty grim about this whole forced globalization is what actually came through those ports first. The economic reality was incredibly harsh. For decades after opening, a massive 70% of all foreign imports was just opium. The remaining 30% was just a random mix of cotton, wool goods, metals, and basic sundries. So essentially, Taiwan's brand new consumer market was completely hijacked by a single, highly addictive narcotic. And the financial drain? Just staggering. A full 50% of Taiwan's foreign exchange earnings went straight into buying opium from overseas. Half of everything the entire island earned globally was literally going up in smoke, which severely handicapped the local economy. But beyond the money, the human scale of this was an absolute tragedy. Widespread addiction swept the island. It got so deeply ingrained in the culture that almost every single village in Taiwan had its own opium den. It's a really dark reality, and it serves as a super stark contrast to the massive economic booms we're going to talk about next. Which brings us to Section 3, sweet success, Southern sugar. So to counter that crazy outflow of cash from the opium trade, Taiwan desperately needed lucrative exports. Enter what became known as Taiwan's 3 treasures, starting with the oldest and highest volume commodity of the 3, sugar. Now, sugar production down in southern Taiwan was already a massive staple, going all the way back to the Dutch colonial era, mostly shipping out to Japan and China. But with those 1858 treaties, the market just exploded. Exports rapidly expanded to Western Europe, the Americas, and even Australia. At its peak in the late 19th century, sugar exports hit nearly 1 million units. It was the highest volume export product of the era, hands down. Moving on to Section 4, camphor, a global monopoly. The second treasure was something totally unique to the island. It was camphor, derived from camphor trees mostly located up in the mountainous regions south of Chiayi. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth was camphor so incredibly valuable back then? Well, it wasn't just some bug repellent. It was actually a crucial ingredient for perfume manufacturing, a super vital component for early smokeless gunpowder, and the wood itself was highly prized for shipbuilding. It was basically a miracle resource for an industrializing world. And here is the kicker. Before synthetic alternatives were invented, Taiwan held a jaw-dropping 70 to 80% monopoly on the entire world's camphor supply. I mean, think about that. It was Taiwan's first true world #1 product. And because they essentially cornered the global market, the profits were just astronomical. And this brilliantly illustrates the much darker side of resource booms. Because, camphor wasn't their only near monopoly. Taiwan also held 90% of the world's supply of this beautiful resource known as Peng Hu black coral. But it vanished. It quickly disappeared due to relentless over-extraction. It's a sobering cautionary tale, right? When a local population or governing body lacks conservation practices, a world-leading natural resource can be completely plundered and wiped out in just a few decades.
All right, our final stop, Section 5, the Formosa tea boom.
Let's see how all of this builds into the most transformative export of all. Because while sugar had the crazy volume and camphor had the huge profit margins, it was actually tea that truly connected Taiwan to the modern global supply chain and reshaped its society. The rise of Taiwan tea is this fantastic mini-narrative of international teamwork. Picture this. It's 1865, and a British merchant named John Dodd shows up in Taipei to buy camphor and sell opium. But he ends up teaming up with his brilliant local expert named Li Chunsheng, who is now known as the father of Taiwan tea. Together, they realize the terrain in northern Taiwan is absolutely perfect for growing tea. So in 1866, Dodd boldly imports tea seeds from Anxi, China, and actually loans money to local farmers to encourage them to plant it. He buys up the harvest, processes it, and by 1869, he charters 2 ships to send Formosa oolong directly to New York, and the American market went totally wild for it. An absolute global sensation was born overnight. From there, 2 massive global markets really took off. That famous Formosa oolong, with its super distinct flavor, was mostly heading over to the United States. Meanwhile, another variety, Pouchong tea, found this huge, eager market down in Southeast Asia. And the economic impact on the ground? Just unbelievable. Foreign merchants rushed in, setting up all these tea processing facilities in the Dadaocheng area of Taipei. Try to paint this mental picture. It became like a massive open-air factory. Every single day, over 10,000 workers would flock to Dadaocheng, squatting under the arcades and verandas just to meticulously pick tea stems. It completely, fundamentally revolutionized the local labor market. The ultimate economic result of all this hustle was staggering. Between 1868 and 1895, tea just completely dominated. It made up a massive 54% of Taiwan's total export value. Think about that. More than half of the island's entire export wealth was coming from those exact same tea seeds that John Dodd and Li Chunsheng took a chance on just a few years prior. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative question. When the world comes knocking for your hidden treasures, does opening your doors bring lasting prosperity or rapid plunder? As we've seen with 19th century Taiwan, the answer is remarkably complex. That forced opening brought the absolute tragedy of widespread opium addiction and the permanent loss of resources like black coral. Yet at the exact same time, it sparked this incredible innovation, turning local resources like camphor and a handful of imported tea seeds into massive global industries that generated unimaginable wealth. It's such a fascinating chapter of history to reflect on. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking questions.